So here we are, the next episode of Good Game Club podcast.
This is yet another interesting one. I think understanding your audience is one that all game makers is keen to get more of, and talking about how that sets the scene for everything we're doing in games is very interesting.
It's super interesting. It's I think that connection between the non-games industry and the industry, and when I read Bastian's book Press Play, which will tell us more about, I was just like, we have to have him on the show because the connection there was just so relevant.
The best way for an adult to rewire their brain for us to learn something new is if we learn through play. Gaming is a medium. Gaming is a touch point, and I would argue it's the defining consumer medium of our time.
So what do you see as the mental hurdles to overcome if you were a traditionally non-gaming company putting gaming into the mix? What's that journey look like?
I think it has to start with the realization that almost 3.5 billion people play video games almost daily. So in some cases, brands are better off staying away compared to they're showing up inauthentically.
An example would be, start off small, but don't just do something and think, well, that didn't work. Do something and learn from it and grow.
We're definitely at an inflection point where we need everyone to understand what games is.
One of the most encouraging statistics that I've heard in recent weeks is that 78% of parents co-play with their kids. And I wish it was 100.
Bastian, thank you so much for being on the show with us. And if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Bastian. I'm a co-founder, COO of Solsten. As you mentioned, audience insights is a big topic for us. We work at the intersection of AI and psychological data, really just helping developers, brands, companies in general understand the human being behind a player or behind the customer, because it's all about we're interfacing with humans. They're not just data points. So how do we actually create a meaningful understanding that puts us in a better position to make really, really good and really healthy and really resonating experiences for folks? And I wrote a book too. Called Press Play, Why Every Company Needs a Gaming Strategy. So it's really about zooming out from the gaming industry and looking at all of the non-endemics, whether it's fitness or sports betting or consumer goods, but really the big thesis being that play is such a powerful force through which, human beings connect with each other and companies can connect with humans and with their customers. And the data speaks for itself. And I think every brand that wants to be at the forefront of engaging the modern day consumer, they can't look beyond video games.
So thinking of as a company not in games and pursuing a gaming strategy, what game should they start playing? What's the first intro? Honestly,
I would say anything. I wouldn't want to box people in and just say where your curiosity takes you, like naturally. Because I think that's what it's really about, is it's, for people that don't have a strong affinity to video games and they're looking at this industry outside in, where do they most naturally gravitate to? And just start leaning into that. And then I think if you wanted to be more methodical or more strategic about it, if you start with what is your audience? So if I'm trying to think of a good brand, Starbucks, and I want to look at a gaming strategy for Starbucks. If you do the research and you start to get a sense of, okay, well, what are coffee fans maybe playing? What types of games would I find them and what do they lean towards? Or Starbucks fans and Starbucks customers specifically, if you can dig into that type of research and surface those insights, those are the types of games that I would start playing. But if it's really just about let's figure this out and get a feel for what it is, honestly, anything, just jump in.
And I guess one way to do it could be to take an example of games that you play as a board game, for example, like Monopoly, or maybe it's like a Sudoku or chess, and playing the digital version of that to get a feel for how digital games work before kind of diving into kind of like the console type games. But that could be a really kind of simple step for executives who are like trying to get their heads around this space. But why do you think that every company would need a gaming strategy, and why now?
There's two answers to that question. Why do they need a gaming strategy? Because at the end of the day, they're interacting with human beings. So if you think about, let's talk about the data. Young audiences spend about 3 times more in terms of engagement and the time in gaming environments, whether it's Minecraft or Roblox and Fortnite, than all social media channels combined. For Gen Alpha, gaming, and this is the first demographic cohort, the first consumer generation that we've ever had, gaming is the number one medium through which they're consuming anything. They game more than they do streaming, they watch videos, social media, anything. Gaming is also the only medium that cuts across all demographic cohorts. Fun fact, and a lot of people don't know this, the fastest growing segment in terms of adoption, time played, time spent playing video games on an hourly basis, are people 80 years and above. It's the silver surfers. So yes, granted, they're coming off of a smaller base, but they're adopting it very, very quickly. So what you can see in the data is, ultimately what it comes back to is the concept of play. If you've ever observed a toddler learn about the world, it's through play, it's through unstructured play. The best way for an adult to rewire their brain for us to learn something new is if we learn through play. And video games are effectively just a digital manifestation of the concept of play. That's why they're so effective at engaging us. It's the way they connect with how our brains are wired, the different loops, how they're able to create, flow states, immersion, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, if you look at all the data, games are where culture exists, is where all the engagement lives, is where time spent is. It's also where monetization happens. So all of the data is out there. And, if you're a traditional company, we're recording this in London, so let's pick a British, iconic company, Burberry. If you think of the traditional Burberry customer, that customer cohort is getting older and older and older. And they're going to need new people buying a trench coat eventually. That's their product, right? And I'm oversimplifying. But they can't bank on the 80-year-old grandpa buying 50 more trench coats because they're getting older. So where's the new generation coming in? And their journey with brands and how they connect with brands and products, they're not going to go to Soho to intentionally seek out the Burberry location and I'm going to try on 5 different trench coats. Their journey starts online and it starts in video games. So if I want, as a brand and as a company, if I want that interface, I'm going to have to go where my consumer is. And that's video games. And why people always ask me, well, is it really that every company needs a strategy? It's like, yes, it's intentionally a little bit facetious, but I do stand by it because even some very traditional companies, take B2B companies, or my very first employer where I started my career was the Boston Consulting Group. One of the very first projects that I got to work on was we built a video game to train our internal consultants on business strategies, and then we took it to our clients. So, and that was 12 years ago at this point. So it comes back to the concept of play, whether I always say to people, well, if you have a company, do you think that company interacts with human beings? I'll go like, well, probably, because either you're interacting with customers or you have employees, and likely you have both, and they're humans. So whatever the process is, it's just more about where's the application, what's the use case. But there's no doubt that either externally facing or internally, even with employees, there's a lot of benefits to be had from deploying video games in those contexts.
I love that. So I just want to touch on that point because so in my background was developing games for training in education, and a lot of the work was around, taking a PowerPoint that would have been 1,000 pages. You're teaching an organization, you're teaching people a new process, but there's different outcomes. And games are brilliant at cause and effect. Yeah. There's different pathways and there's different outcomes. And so if you're a part of a process, you need to understand what's changing and what the impact of your role on someone a few steps down would be. So I completely get that. So I think that's, you see companies already starting to apply that sort of strategy internally. And I think that's only going to grow.
It's a terrific example because what's the alternative? Giving people an 800-question questionnaire?
One of the words that people have used and sometimes overused is gamification.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So can you explain a bit about why gaming strategy is a better term for what you are thinking about?
Yeah. Gamification and personalization are, in my view, the two most abused and misunderstood words in the business world over the last 15 years. Everyone throws them around and no one really pays attention to what we mean by that. And I feel bad for Yu-Kai Chao, because he wrote the book Actionable Gamification, and it's a great book, but it's just misunderstood and people have misapplied it. And that thing came out, 15 years ago or something? And I think what has happened is, and that's when what people conflate with gamification, you take an isolated game mechanic, you slap it into your own experience, and you call it a day. It's all about the loop. It's not about an isolated mechanic. It's what is the journey that we're sending people on, right? What is the task that we're giving them? What's that action? What's the feedback reward? And how do I make that journey really immersive? Because that's what's flow state inducing. How quickly do you move and how effectively and seamlessly do you move from action to action to action to action? So that's the fundamental premise of how you would do gamification well. Gaming is a medium. Gaming is a touch point. And I would argue it's the defining consumer medium of our time. And then how you get to a gaming strategy is, okay, if I had that realization, how does gaming, in the broadest sense, with all the different pathways that you could take, serve the objectives of my organization, of my business, whether it's I need to train my employees more effectively, back to that example, if I want to get in front of new consumers, new customers, do I want to increase monetization? Do I want to increase value for my IP if I'm an entertainment company? Whatever the use case is, but you work backwards from what do you actually do and what do you want to do as a company? And then how does gaming fit into that strategic paradigm holistically? Because it could have very, very many different applications and manifestations. It could be, I lay this out in the book and I tried to really boil it down to honestly 4 really simple pathways to make it really easy for people. And there's nuances and complexities. But to me, at a very high level, it comes down to, well, you can integrate with a game that already exists. Like maybe if I want to get in front of a lot of people and maybe Subway Surfers is the game, that has an overlap with what I want to do. How do I place myself as a brand, as a company? How can I do a partnership with you guys and get into that game? That's effectively the first strategic pathway. You could build your own. You could do either one or two and leverage blockchain underneath because it opens up monetization and marketplace avenues. Or you do what Peloton and BMW did and you actually make games a part of your actual product, which is, that's, I think, what you would ultimately most closely align with what we would traditionally or historically call gamification. It's right. You bring gaming into outside of the gaming world into another existing world. And that I think would be the fourth quadrant there.
And doing so, if you are an executive of a company saying, well, that sounds exciting. I'm not the CEO of Burberry, but I have a competing trench coat company, or I want to do what Bastian is preaching. Is that then getting consultants in to gamify from within, or is it what's the actual steps, or what do you see as the mental hurdles to overcome if you were a traditionally non-gaming company putting gaming into the mix? What's that journey? That's a great question.
The biggest hurdle still to this day that a lot of these companies have is actually a mental hurdle. And it's a misconception and the stereotype that they cling on to that quote unquote gamers are 18 to 20-year-old dudes in a basement, slinging a Red Bull can with neon lights in the background. They're playing a shooter game on their PC. Like, yes, these people exist. Absolutely. Maybe that was even, the more dominant type of gamer 25, 30 years ago. But I think it has to start with the realization that almost 3.5 billion people play video games almost daily. That's bigger than the population of India and China combined. It's also bigger than any religion we've ever seen on planet Earth. So that kind of puts it into context how big gaming is. So I think it starts there. That's the mental, is like, quote unquote, everybody plays. So that's step one. You got to get behind and beyond these misconceptions and the stereotypes. And then step two, whether you do that with a consultant or if you can do the work internally, I think that's kind of case by case and depends a little bit on the company too and their setup. But you have to start with the audience. if you jump straight to the conclusion, we need to be on Roblox. Okay, you might end there, but you also might not at all. And I think one of the things that a lot of brands and companies that go down this path have to realize, when you go into these environments, it's not about you. It's about the people and their game that they're playing, and how do you fit into that world. And you can't answer that question. You can't show up, and that's the key thing, authentically. Because when people are in a state of play, when they're immersed, anything that's even has like the slightest perception of like being inauthentic, the rejection is that much stronger compared to when people aren't in a state of immersion and aren't in a state of play. It's just that much more visceral and emotional. So in some cases, brands are better off staying away compared to their showing up inauthentically.
Something that you said, you talk about, which really resonated with me, is about it not being a campaign. It's not a one-off. It's a movement, and it's about how a brand shows up. Would be an example. Would be start off small, but don't just do something and think, well, that didn't work. Do something and learn from it and grow. And that goes back to your authentic point as well. But it's more of a movement and building on your experience, rather than it just being a one-off. Yeah. Because that's really like inauthentic.
I think we're seeing it in Subway Surfers, because authenticity is one of the words we use the most discussing what are the options. And I think your point about some executives outside of gaming have then thought, okay, I've seen that there's a concert happening in Fortnite. We should all be planning our version of a concert in Fortnite. And then you're like, that's 3 steps ahead of where you are. Companies come to us all the time and say, we would love for you guys to pay for our brand to be in your game. And we're saying, well, wait a second, we're having 100 to 150 million users every month. This is a massive campaign for your brand to be visible amongst our players. But we have that conversation every time. And the best partnerships we have is with companies that see that value and see that authentically, if we can make a collaboration. Sometimes even without money exchanged, but just 2 brands collaborating like we did with Brawl Stars. That works a lot better. Where if you have just someone doing one video or one campaign, then sure, but not necessarily. That's not where the fans are or how they engage with brands.
Yeah, I think you both are spot on, and the point that you're raising, Jude, is actually, I think, the second, because you asked about barriers and hurdles earlier. To me, that's the second biggest one after that the misconception, the stereotypes, is, executives coming from, the non-endemics coming from outside gaming, wanting to copy paste tried and true playbooks. It's what you described is so spot on. Well, but I'm the big brand. I'm coming with the big name. You should pay me. It's like, wait a minute, I'm giving you access to 150 million people. There's this is a little backwards. Let's talk about that. It's this campaign mentality. You do a thing, a one-off, and you're done. And when I did a ton of hundreds of really inspiring and insightful interviews and all the research for the book, and there was one specific session on this point that really stuck with me, which was Raja, the CMO of Mastercard. And because what a lot of people don't know, Mastercard was one of the first big companies to go into gaming, like back in 2012. And you go, wait a minute, they don't even have a direct-to-consumer business. You can't go, with Visa and Amex, you can go on their website and get your own credit card. With Mastercard, you can't do that. Their customers are the banks. But here they are, as a brand in gaming, nurturing and establishing the relationships with consumers directly to build that connection and have that awareness, so that when you go to your bank and your bank says you could have the, HSBC Visa, or would you like the Mastercard? And maybe it's even the League of Legends themed Mastercard, because that was one of the collaborations. At that point, it's not even a question for you which credit card you choose. And he said something that on this point that I think just absolutely nails it. He says, for us at Mastercard, gaming is a 365-day, 24/7 initiative. It's always on. Always on.
I've spoken to quite a few executives in Denmark on how digital was basically the precursor of what you're talking about. We want a digital strategy. And there was a couple of years where everyone talked about going digital. And I said, look, this is this is almost like a redundant conversation because of course you're digital.
Yeah.
Of course you should also be,
Yeah.
but you shouldn't think, how are we doing this digitally? You should just be doing it digitally and talk about what that enables.
Yep.
And what happened was, at least for some of the companies I was closest to, that digital became like a chief digital officer.
Mm-hmm.
So it became a tick box for top management to say, we
Yep.
have covered this field, but the chief digital officer was not allowed to touch product.
Yep.
It was more on the website or
Yeah, exactly.
do campaigns over here, but we know what
Yep.
we're good at.
Yep.
And I think it makes me think of that when you say that gaming needs to be inherently owned by the broader management.
Yeah.
That it shouldn't be sort of every company tomorrow should, based on this podcast, hire a chief gaming officer.
Oh gosh, please no,
because
please
that
don't.
would be the worst, sort of parking
100%.
it to the side.
That's it. You're giving it a label, and what that's going to lead to is, especially if the very first initiative that you're doing, then if you go that route organizationally, isn't a smashing success right away. It's going to get siloed. Everyone's going to smile at like the chief digital officers. I'm with you. I know so many that have that title and have no budget and no team, but they have that title. I'm like, well, you're a king without a court. What do? You have no power, no sway over the actual strategy. And again, like some companies are obviously very different. But yeah, please don't hire a chief gaming officer. It should be just an integral part of your core business functions, whether that's obviously business strategy, consumer engagement, consumer strategy, marketing to an extent. It should cut across all of that. I don't necessarily think it has to live within marketing. That's typically the knee-jerk reaction you get. Oh, this is a marketing thing. It's a good place maybe to start. Ultimately, it needs to be cross-functional because I think it should touch product. It should touch consumer engagement, corporate strategy in general, and not just marketing, because gaming has the ability for these companies not just to, if you think of the marketing funnel, not just to impact top of funnel. It could very much impact middle and bottom of funnel as well. And if you consider that just last year, it was $15 billion in virtual goods were sold in gaming environments. 15 billion virtual goods. So there's real economies there already. And then on top of that, you have about 86% of people that buy an item that exists within a gaming environment, they proceed to purchase the corresponding physical item if it exists. I don't know any other channel or touch point that has an 86% virtual to physical conversion rate. I absolutely don't. So I think you're spot on. If the conclusion is that you're going to silo it into here's our gaming thing, it's bound to fail right away.
A good example is Lego.
Yeah.
I hope we will also get them on the podcast. We have good relationships with them, and as much as we can support them in doing more good, the better. But I think it was quite interesting to see the shift they had strategically from thinking digital or gaming as something someone should work on somewhere else.
Yeah.
But we are a bricks company. And then, of course, lo and behold, Minecraft pops up and you're like, what?
Yep.
And they have to make then a licensing agreement of putting Minecraft on a Lego box, which is for me like when EA Sports starts sponsoring FIFA.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second, this is the inverse happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the digital, the gaming push is so strong that the games have to react. And now we can see that Lego is taking games way more seriously.
Yeah.
And even from a family point of view, investing into Epic, into Fortnite, into things because they can see that our players are here. We also want them to have the brick experience, but how do we actually make it more seamlessly integrated that we can do both, and we are a company that are both?
That's exactly it, and I do think the solution that is right for that specific company is different company by company. And the Lego example is really interesting because they have gaming teams inside of the Lego corporation, the massive beast where the bricks business lives too. That's where the Fortnite team, for example, sits. And then outside of that whole construct, they have Lego Digital Play, which is a separate entity, completely different entity, separate management, separate budget, separately funded, separate agenda, different goals. They get to operate outside of the confines of the, call it, traditional core business with all its different implications. And that's where they're shielded, and their mandate is, you guys go. We make games with our IP, with Lego as a brand, as an IP, but we can make all sorts of games ourselves. And I think that's one organizational setup that they've had to learn because they had to go through the motions. And I think there's a learning in that, which you guys as game makers are going to resonate a lot with you, I hope, is making games is hard. So for anyone that goes, great, I love this, maybe they read the book, I hope they did, they listened to you guys, and they go, man, these three, this all makes sense. We're going to make games starting tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. Like, expect to fail, honestly. Expect it to be hard. If you look at Disney's relationship, Disney's journey with games over the last 30 years, it's this. It looks like a bipolar relationship at best. It's on and off, because it's hard. It's really hard to do.
So, I mean, we're talking here about kind of entertainment companies or toy companies kind of getting into the gaming space, and it's kind of a natural progression for them.
Yeah.
But what, I know you've got examples in your book, but is there any kind of standout example that you've got of a non-games company that has been leveraging gaming and it's worked well?
Yeah, I think there's so many of them. If you look at one that's not in the book, Duolingo comes to mind immediately. Like, if you open Duolingo 5 years ago, it was a learning app. It just felt like learning. And then they used gamification. We're back to that. Now, if you open Duolingo, it feels like a best-in-class mobile game. It doesn't even feel like a learning app anymore. It looks and feels like an actual mobile game. And I think what they're doing now with music and chess and Simon leading those efforts, and they're actively trying to acquire more gaming teams and games to lead with the games to get content and learning through to people. I think that's a great example. Peloton is an amazing example. That's also in the book, where they made a video game and they started with the audience data. So they looked at, what do Peloton users really need? What types of gaming experiences do they gravitate to? How do we get them motivated to do more workouts, be healthier, longer workouts, all this stuff. And they actually built a video game off of that called Lane Break, which is workout content. So as you're riding your Peloton bike, you can have an instructor yell at you, or you could play a Lane Break and it simulates how you're riding your Peloton bike, but you're actually playing a game while you're doing it. And when you look at the numbers now, more than half of all workouts on a Peloton bike globally are done in that video game. And the people that do that specific cohort, they come back for more workouts on a weekly basis, and those workouts are longer too. So talk about retention and engagement and the power of games to keep people and bring them back. I really love that example. One other one is the New York Times. In an industry, publishing, that has been, in decline, is putting it mildly, over the last 15 years. They are one of the few that's bucking that trend entirely, and that's been able to grow their digital revenues through subscription significantly. And the key driver is actually the New York Times Games subscriptions, that Games app. They have about 10 games now live, I think. And what's interesting at their numbers, when you look at the people that come through the Games subscription, they upsell into the bigger subscription way more frequently. They engage with news and other content way more frequently than people that come in through the other avenues into the New York Times universe. So they used to say in the 1940s, they had this saying, when they had just a crossword puzzle, it was people come for the news and they stay for the game. And internally, they've actually flipped it around, where they say people come for the games and they stay for the news.
I think what I love about that example, we also talked about in some of the other episodes, that in the hierarchy of entertainment, like ballet and opera is a very fine art to follow.
Yeah.
And then you get to movies and TV series and stuff. Yeah. Newspapers is also up there.
Yeah.
And what I love about New York Times saying, well, actually, Wordle is a great game, and you learn and you expand your vocabulary. There's all these benefits of a very simple game, also made by a small indie team. And there's so many good stories in that. But it's showing that they can actually pair up means a lot. And I think actually a lot more than most people recognize, of the recognition of games as a means of both educating and learning, but also the whole sort of, well, I can do both. I can be a type that reads newspapers that also plays a game. Yeah. Way back, not even that long ago, 5-10 years ago, if you ask people in executive roles, are you playing games? They would say, I don't have time. Yeah. But I'm always reading the news in the morning. Yeah. It would be like, well, that's part of the media landscape for me, that I also want to be entertained or have a break through games. So I think what they're doing is actually also putting games higher on the hierarchy of
Absolutely.
This is fine dining. This is also an experience.
Yeah, it's that, and then I think the other point that I would add to that, it's also people's lack of self-awareness. A lot of times people don't know that they're playing, or they don't realize it. Like my mom, I'm like, "What's that on your phone?" "Oh, that's an app." I'm like, "That's Candy Crush. It's a game." No, it's an app. And Wordle fits into that category. 2048, Strands, all these, like, you wouldn't necessarily jump to, well, that's a game. And I think that's obviously a lot more prevalent on mobile than on, again, that's back to the stereotypes. PC, console, you sit down, maybe you have a disc, you download, controller. That's gaming. Picking up your phone and getting a couple of minutes in on whatever game it is, to a lot of people, they wouldn't equate that to, I'm playing a game. It's just something I'm doing on my phone. It has to do with, the habits of how we use these devices. I think that's also a part of it. And what's so interesting about what you mentioned and called out there with consumption and elevating that to a higher, kind of the fine dining of entertainment or media consumption, why the New York Times is able to do that, it brings us back to the point around authenticity. Look at what types of games they're making. It's very focused on the puzzle category in the broadest sense, but that's their mission internally. If you ask Jonathan Knight about what are you guys trying to do and how did you start, he said, the first thing I said was, I defined the vision and the mission for our team so clearly. And for us, it's about becoming the premier destination for puzzle games. That's it. We're going to experiment on the fringes, maybe some word games here and there, but that's the category. They're not going into, football simulation or, a bunch of different merge games now or racing games. They could do all of that, and they're not doing it because it's not authentic to the brand that is the New York Times. And I think that to me is one of the biggest, takeaways from their success story of why that worked. And again, the Washington Post didn't work. It's they nailed the authenticity part. They did something with gaming that is just so true to who they are. And again, if you look at the early 2000s, I think it was 2009 when they launched the iOS app on mobile. And then the first thing that they brought into that app wasn't some other game. It was the crossword puzzle, because that's who they are. They started with that, and then they gradually expanded from there. And I do think there's a big lesson to be learned for other companies when you look at that trajectory.
I think that's so interesting as well, because you're kind of expanding the reach into that non-gamer community. And, like you said, people are playing games without realizing they're gamers. If there's loads of times I've done presentations and said to people in the audience, like, put up your hand if you're a gamer. And, a few hands go up, and then I say, well, who plays Candy Crush or Sudoku, or, even like a crossword puzzle games on your phone. And then loads of hands go up. So I think that's super interesting. But something that we spoke about before, which again really resonates with me, is that because of the way the industry portrays itself, is there do we need to change the narrative from the industry perspective? Because we were talking about 3.6 billion people play games, or 40% of the global population, 60% don't play. How do we help them understand what games are and to get them to play? But is it the fine-tuning of the narrative from the industry that has to change?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm going to get some heat for this, I'm sure. But if I look at, because we work with a lot of game developers and publishers too, and one of my personally biggest struggles that I have with, not every developer, but on average, where I'm like, I think that type of thinking is holding you guys back, is this clinging on to looking at games as its isolated form of entertainment that you ship. It's this contained thing in and of itself, which, yes, you built that, but if you think a little bit more holistically and you think about games as platforms, your thinking all of a sudden starts to evolve. You made a great point. You could look at Subway Surfers as, well, we have a bunch of people that come in every day and they do this thing, and your thinking stops there. Or you could say, wait a minute, yeah, they do a lot of different things here, but it's a portal where I can give others access to 100 to 150 million people. You're starting with the same premise, but your conclusions are going to change dramatically from, okay, well, what can I do with this? And I think that's one of the big things where, you know, sometimes I'll get some, you know, pushback from developers and say, well, you know, all these brands and we're doing all of this and it's against the creative art form. And I understand that. And yes, at the end of the day, games are a creative endeavor. That's why they're so hard to make and they're so hard to get right. But there's nothing wrong. And actually, like, you don't really have a business if you can't keep the lights on and make money and put food on the table. You have a responsibility for everyone. So the truth is somewhere in the middle. Like, if it's just art for the sake of art, okay, that's fine. But that's a different part of the conversation. I think that's the mindset that has to shift a little bit, where us getting comfortable with, well, there's nothing wrong if it's a, I don't know, quote unquote, simpler experience, a more accessible experience that's broadly available. That's not better or worse than, you know, whatever, the top 10 games that are nominated for the Game Awards this year. Or Hades, or you know, Grand Theft Auto 6. Like, the game doesn't have to cost $2 billion for it to be an effective game or a great game. Like, it could be something that's a lot simpler, a lot cheaper. And I wouldn't objectify it as such. Like, one's not better than the other. It's about what's the purpose, what's the point of it, and what are we trying to do.
It makes me think of what you also do in your daytime job, because of course the whole psychological insight and player profiling, learning who is playing, why are they playing.
Yeah.
It also ties a bit into AI and the big data, finding out how do you balance the ethical part of it.
Yeah.
So how close can you get to the players, and how do you make sure that you keep the right balance? Can you share some of your thoughts around that?
That's a great question. So for us specifically, because we're aware that we're handling sensitive data, and we can get to know people pretty intimately. And that's why every person in our system is fully anonymous. We don't know the individual, and we don't need to. And I think that's the beautiful part, where in a way we're able to give developers, publishers, companies, brands the ability to get closer to their customer, much, much closer than ever before, without having to know who they are in real life. Because that's the reality. Your email address, your credit card, your zip code, your name, your email don't say anything about who you are, or, to your point, why you play what you play, or why you made that one purchase in Subway Surfers, but then you didn't buy the other item. Has nothing to do with your zip code or your age or your gender. So it's really about, if we want to make better experiences for people, we have to get to know them as the humans that they are, because that's the relevant information. Like, think about it in a really simple, everyday example. If you were to make a gift for your partner, right? And you have all the, you know them really well, you know them really intimately, you have all these different information, you have like shared history, all this stuff. And you know that, and then I have to make a gift for your partner, and you just tell me like, yeah, you know, roughly this age, born here, you know, gender, maybe lives in this part of town, here's the email address, who's going to make the better gift? It's no question. And I think that's the good, you know, analogy there. So can any sort of data or any sort of technology be also exploited to an extent? Sure. When we discovered fire, it was great because now we can cook our meat and we're not getting sick anymore because we're eating raw meat all the time, you know? And then another person goes, oh, I can burn down my neighbor's village. It's about what we do with it. The onus is on us as people, like with anything. It's whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain, whether it's any sort of type of data, whether it's nuclear energy, whether it was fire, whether it was splitting the atom, the onus is on us and what we do with it.
Is there a max to that? So of course, Subway Surfers is a very casual game. We also pride ourselves of being a snack in between sessions or people's, not the primary game, but the secondary game.
Yeah.
Having that as a premise also means that I would love if people played it 30 minutes, but I didn't want to start a campaign where if you don't play 4 hours, you're not a real gamer.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you don't drive retention above and beyond what is healthy? How do you make sure that you balance healthy gameplay with your insights? If you could say, actually, our insights show that we can get this player to play 10 hours a day from metrics that show that this is profitable, but not necessarily good for the individual. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so you could track different metrics over time, like people's actual scores around people's sleep, people's well-being data, emotional data. How are they actually feeling? How healthy are they? How good are their social metrics and all that stuff? And you could see over time, let's say retention goes up and people are playing more and more, because more is not better. That's what you're articulating. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, yeah.
For some games it is, for some people it is, but not necessarily. It's not a one size fits all. And you would be able to see over time, oh, there's cohorts that let's say they're playing 10 hours and more. That's great from an hours played and engagement perspective, but we can see their sleep scores are actually deteriorating over time. Their social well-being scores are deteriorating over time. That's not a healthy level of engagement, because now we're at a point where we're keeping them away from other things that they should be doing. So now you could revert that and say, okay, we're going to shut your experience off at certain times of the day. Like you don't get to play 2 hours before bedtime, or whatever the applicable use case is.
I think that's super, super interesting as both at the ethical discussion and as the sort of what is healthy gameplay.
Yeah.
And how do we help also through this podcast and through all the initiatives in the industry, both from Tencent and the industry organizations. How do we promote that's not the goal?
Yeah.
That people should have healthy gaming and they should play what is age appropriate and the amounts that they can have time for, but also the amount that they can have they can afford.
Yeah.
Because the long-term healthy gamer is someone who plays something that they like, feel rewarded for, and that can sustain over time, not something that comes in, as you say, uninstalling things because this was not good for me.
Yep.
Don't ever play anything that makes you feel bad.
Exactly.
Play the things that you feel teaches you things or socializes you or gives you the break that you need.
Yep.
But do it in a healthy amount, because the opposite is definitely true for some games. And then you get into a cycle of well, is this game playing me? Or am I playing that
Absolutely.
game? And how do we, through the podcast, also showcase some of the good examples of balancing that as a gameplay?
Yeah.
But also from a data point of view, can we actually show the research and all the things that can educate both game makers, but also players with the vocabulary to control their own lives?
Yeah, and the other group is, I think what's really important is the non-gaming companies that are trying to get into games. It's like, how can they do it ethically rather than just thinking it's extraction? It's got to be that shared value model. And I love the audience profiling rather than doing it by demographic and doing it more in a psychological insights way. I think that's really important as well, because it would help to build that more like deeper long-term relationship. And this is what we're saying about, the 365 days a year always on model. Like this is the way that non-game companies have to think about it.
That's exactly it. And I think you can't even operate that way if you don't even have the insight in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you're going to work off of very abstract, high-level, stereotypical categorizations, which, what do those lead to? Bias. All of us, the three of us, have a different idea in our head. If I say, well, this is for 30 to 40-year-old men in the United Kingdom, all three of us have a different idea because of our own biases. Now, if we go, well, it's a super altruistic person and they're motivated by status, but they love mastery and learning. Now, the three of us are going to have a shared understanding of who that is, because it's really explicit and specific and it's human. And I think that's the point. If you don't even have the data in the first place, how can you be human-centric? You can't. So how can you make healthy experiences? You might stumble into them, but then it's an accident, or it's really good intuition, which is good. But the downside is you can't replicate it because there's no recipe, because it's intuition. You stumbled into it. So you need that level of insight to even have the transparency to be put in a position to be able to act ethically and responsibly in the first place. And then I think, hopefully there's some people listening to this too that are not on the game maker side, but on the, consumption side, people that play predominantly. Because I do think it takes two to tango. Like there's definitely an onus on the people that make the experiences. Absolutely. But there's also the onus on the person playing. And you started going there a little bit where have a little bit of self-awareness around how does this make me feel? Try and observe your own play patterns of when do I play all this stuff? Is it whenever I struggle in life, whenever I have really bad moments, like, okay, maybe it's giving you relief of anxiety and coping, but are you just evading your problems or is it temporary, or is it habitual and you're just actually avoiding hard conversations, for example, in your life? Well, it's not good long-term either. So I do think that's really important, because what goes hand in hand with that, and that's for people on the outside a lot of times, there's all these misconceptions around shooter games are bad, just to pick one example. No, not true at all. Shooter games are responsible for mass school shootings. No, not true, not at all. Do certain games have a certain impact on certain people? Yes, but it depends on the person. Now we're back to that. So why is it, some people might be more receptive to, the violence being portrayed in certain shooter games, and they mistake that for reality? Yes. Shooter games are one of the most effective forms of treating PTSD in veterans and soldiers. So it's extremely helpful and beneficial. So now I'm at the polar opposite end of the spectrum. And here we are sometimes in, the mass media and the, general population conversation, shooter games are bad. And then you look at these two ends of the spectrum, it's like, it's not true. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And I think that's what we need to have, is a nuanced conversation that's informed by the data and by the insight, and say, hey, what we're trying to put into our game is going to be really good for these people. Here's an audience over here that's part maybe of the people that already play our game, where we have to be careful and we have to monitor, because they might be more receptive or they might be more prone to develop addictive behaviors, for example. So we have to be careful. Let's watch that cohort really explicitly. And if we see like, there's something going on, and all of a sudden, to your point, they used to play 30 minutes in between doing other things, and now they're playing 5 hours every single day, and it's just disproportionate. Okay, maybe let's just dial it back for them and see what happens, because we have a feeling that something's off.
It's also back to the shooter game. It's interesting that I don't have the data for the penetration in Denmark as a country. I guess we play as much shooter games as any other country. And we don't have the mass shootings, because in Denmark, shooting a gun or a rifle is not normal. It's only a hunting thing. So some of the fantasies that people can healthily escape to or try, the same with speeding. I've never heard anyone accusing that speeding comes from racing in games. That's still a thing of the drivers. It's not the cars. Absolutely. So I think it's quite interesting how the nuances become important. And the more data we have, the more research we have, the easier it also is to show that, yes, you can inspire people to do some things, but people are not going in the streets throwing birds after pigs or crushing candies with a hammer, because that's a game mechanic that is fun here. It's not encouraging real life action.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think, sadly, people have done kind of bad things because they've been inspired by a character or a story, but not necessarily from games. You see it happening from film, from books, from music. Games are in that as well, but it tends to be games that are picked up in the media. And I think that's where, if you're not a gamer and you're reading the press and you see something negative about a game and something bad happening, you instantly put all games in that bucket. And you're not kind of looking at the wider context of that person's life. So I think the media narrative has to change and look broader. And but I think, it so depends on that person's like social situation and how they are mentally. And it's not just games.
100%. Like no one's ever, I've never heard anyone say, well, we have to, all horror movies we're gonna shut down horror movies. Nothing, no more. No one ever gets to watch a horror movie anymore because someone identified with a character and did something bad because of that. Never. So games have this. It's an easy scapegoat, and I think it's because it's misunderstood, and it gets labels, and you have the stereotypes from the past, and all these things together. It's because people don't understand it. Legislation, regulators, you could see with the latest EU legislation that was proposed around in-game monetization. While I agree with consumer protection generally, and I agree with the spirit of what they were trying to do, you can see that how they're proposing doing it just lacks complete understanding of what games are and how they work and what would actually be beneficial to the consumer. And I think that's what it comes down to. And that's why I actually think, podcasts like this and the conversations that you guys are fostering are extremely important, because it's also about awareness and it's about education. It's about educating people. And it's like, this is what games actually are. It's multifaceted. It's very nuanced. It could be very healthy. It could be detrimental, like any form of content, like any form of entertainment. It's not either or. It's very, very nuanced, and it depends on, to your exact point, whoever's consuming it, the person, their circumstances.
That's one of the objectives, is to try and kind of help the media, help the politicians, help. There's more people in those positions that are now playing games, but there's still a lot that don't. So our hope with this podcast is it brings all this information into one place so that it can help inform those decisions better, but also to help inform the industry to be the best it can be, to show these examples and the how to do, like how to make your games more impactful.
Yeah. We're definitely at an inflection point where we need everyone to understand what games is. Yeah. And I think it's coming naturally because people cross that boundary of having grown up with it or having played themselves. And I think it has happened with all types of entertainment. So when radio came, that was the worst thing ever. Then rock music came, that was eroding the youth. Then TV came. So every time you've introduced a new medium, the reigning class have always said, even back to theater. Theater would destroy society, right? And now theater is fine. So I think it's interesting. It's fine
dining of entertainment.
Exactly. So the more we can get to that sort of understanding that, look, this is just one more way of expressing yourself. This is just one more way. And there's been killings and shootings and stuff in theater for decades, for hundreds of centuries, right? But because games is interactive and because games is sometimes behind a closed door, how do this podcast and how do we in general start the conversation of opening those doors and inviting both the parents into the kids' rooms, talking about what are you playing these days? And when you hear that weird sound from your kids' room, then go in and ask, is it because they're afraid of the zombie that is attacking? Or is it because they just beat their friend in FIFA and it was a victory shout? It might be noisy, but that's also part of how do we talk about games as a natural part of an everyday life.
One of the most encouraging statistics that I've heard in recent weeks is that 78% of parents co-play with their kids. And I wish it was 100. Everyone should do that, to that exact story. And, it has to do with you grow up, you get older. What do you start to lose or what do you start to suppress as you become older? Your inner child. Our playfulness as we age is one of the first things that we tend to suppress that goes away, which is one of the worst things that we could do. And I think that's a big part of it, because to play when you're an adult, it has this and it shouldn't, but it has this negative connotation to it. Sometimes you're not being serious if you play. And I think it's that juxtaposition that we need to break through. And the best thing would be to get that 78% number to 100% and have parents sit down with their kids and, exactly to what you said, play together, experience that together, maybe, be open to what's there. Pick a game yourself that you want to play. Like, I remember when my very first video game was Sonic the Hedgehog on a Sega. And then the Sega was discontinued. I got my first PlayStation, and then it was all about the sports franchises for me. And I remember very vividly all those moments where my dad would play with me. All the different FIFA matches and NHL, like those were the two games, but specifically FIFA. And like he would sit there with me hours sometimes, and we would play together. And, that was 30 years ago. And it's like, I can take myself back to those exact moments and it feels like they happened yesterday. And that's really powerful. Like if you're a parent and, I've two daughters and I've started playing a little bit with our older one. She's in that age now, Super Mario World. So we're racing on the Switch together. But it's like, when I'm, 50, 60 and she gets to be my age, I would love for her to be able to think back to those days. Like, yeah, I remember when dad played with me. Like that's powerful. And that's really powerful human connection through play. And if that's a shooter game, if that's Fortnite over which you can bond, so be it. And if that's a football game, if that's Subway Surfers, if that's whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But if it has the ability to foster that bond between people, to just be open to it.
I think we're getting towards the end. There's so much more. Actually, there's questions that we haven't covered that I would love to cover, but anyway. But we've come back for more. We'll come back for a part 2. We need you back for a part 2 follow up. So every episode is going to have golden thread questions, and we have 2 questions. We have one that's the same for every guest and one that's different that's been provided by the previous guest, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask a golden thread question to the next guest.
So as we prepared for the podcast, one of the things that we kept coming back to is it's interesting to hear what is your favorite game and why.
So I just spoke to one of them. So, FIFA or the NHL franchises. One, I grew up playing a lot of sports, especially hockey. That's like my sport. But for me, it's really, that brings me back to all those moments with my dad and just growing up and having that bond. If you ask me about like a very recent example, it would be Ghosts of Tsushima. I love Japanese culture, so they had me with that. They had me with the theme, but I just love how quickly you can immerse yourself in that world, and you can explore and roam and feel like you're actually a part of that time. And it's a beautiful, beautiful game. But yeah, it'd be those 2, or like 3. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so the question we've got for you from a guest is, so what skills in your personal and professional life do you think were schooled in a game?
Resilience, tenacity, and collaboration. Yeah. Because games both digitally but also physically, because I played a lot of sports and I played a lot of hockey, and both for the digital manifestation of that. But there's this element of like, you just get knocked down, you are gonna lose more than you win initially, and just coming back, doing more, trying again, learning, trying again, figuring it out. That resilience, definitely as a part of that, a certain tenacity of just going after it and like not letting up until you actually get there. But then collaboration, because, I wouldn't just play, for example, against my dad or against friends. We'd play together on teams too. And if you've ever played just like basic FIFA and you try and play as 2 people on the same team, it's actually pretty tricky because you're so used to playing by yourself and directing all the different players on your own. And it's actually really easy. But now you have another person next to you and they're maybe thinking differently. They're seeing the field and what's evolving in front of you differently. So you have to constantly communicate with, I'm going here, you go here. Where are you going? Like, pass it here. So it's like you can't actually make progress or win that game if you're not actively and proactively collaborating with the person next to you. Yeah, and I think those 3 skills, both in my personal and professional life, I do think like if you want to create something or build something, or if you're raising kids, like life's hard. And if it's not hard, there's probably something more meaningful in life that life has in store for you that you could go after. And you're going to need to be resilient. Like you're going to get knocked down. You're going to have to get up, and you're going to have to do it with other people. I think achieving anything meaningful in life comes through working through hard problems with other people, whether it's building a game, building a company, raising kids. Hopefully you're not doing that alone. Hopefully you have a partner doing that with you, working through things with your family. But I think anything really meaningful, really rewarding is inevitably challenging, requires resilience, and it requires other people and doing things together.
Yeah, and that the resilience piece is when we talk about skills of the future, because we don't really know what the skills of the future are going to be. Resilience is like number one, because we need to be resilient to know to deal with what's coming. So yeah, that was a really, really good point.
Thank you for making me feel good about myself.
A really good point.
Best answer so far in the podcast.
It's very good, yes.
Thank you.
But you have an opportunity to ask a question yourself. So what would your question be? And you have no idea who it's for.
Who is your hero in life and why? And it could be a famous person, it could be a non-famous person. I think the only requirement that I would have is it can't be a fictional character. It needs to be a real person.
Great one.
Thank you so much, Bastian.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate
thank you.
it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show.
Such an insightful discussion and a lot of new thoughts, but also I think it's a great perspective to share both for gaming companies. They should be more interested in the profiling and the non-games. How do they look into the industry? Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, it's very
and a great
generous.
human-centered approach as well. Love it. So yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
This episode of the Good Game Club podcast is brought to you with the support of our strategic partner Tencent, who share our ambition to reveal gaming's hidden and unexpected benefits, shedding light on the positive impact that gameplay can have on people and the planet.